Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Kitab-i-Iqan. In this section, we're covering paragraph 99 of the Kitab-i-Iqan. Baha'u'llah describes, in a beautiful and allegorical style of writing, the nature of the spiritual springtime heralded by the coming of the Bab. He states that we have the duty to prepare and strengthen ourselves as to enter the celestial city through the grace of God and abide within the exalted habitation. Baha'u'llah cites a number of verses from the Quran to encapsulate the inner meaning of his words for the uncle of the Bab, who had an Islamic background. Some following key points in this paragraph. Baha'i scriptures describe the appearance of a new manifestation of God as the break of morn. The light mentioned in the verse, God is the light of the heaven and of the earth, is the divine light. The meaning of God hath willed to perfect his light is that God desires to perfect his light despite the desire of enemies to extinguish it. The sentence, in his grasp he holdeth the kingdom of all things, emphasizes the sovereignty and power of God over all things. Apart from its literal meaning, some contexts indicate that the statement, the return to God, has a symbolic meaning pointing to the day of God and the day of resurrection. The celestial city is the condition of acknowledging that God has created us. In paragraph 99, Baha'u'llah describes in a poetic and metaphorical language the nature of the spiritual springtime heralded by the coming of the Bab, illustrating the potentialities and powers latent in it. He then states that such a celestial time calls for the recognition of God, attaining his presence and detachment from everything but him. He uses Quranic verses and the language of imagery to elucidate his message. It is possible to identify three distinct sections in this paragraph. 1, meaning the light of God is breaking. 2, the first section is the passage from now when the light of God's everlasting morn is breaking to is being outstretched unto all the peoples and kindreds of the earth. This part portrays the spiritual ethos of the time, precipitated by the coming of the Qayyam and the day of resurrection. Baha'u'llah associates 4 phenomena with this age. A new day of God is ushered in by the revelation of the Bab. His revelation illumines all mankind with the light of the heavens and the earth. The invincibility of this revelation has been proclaimed. Through this revelation, the absolute power of God reaches all the people of the earth. For each phenomenon, Baha'u'llah cites a verse from the Quran to encapsulate the inner meaning of his words. In the second part of the paragraph, Baha'u'llah describes the spiritual obligations of every individual. It is incumbent on the people of the world to prepare and strengthen themselves so as to enter the celestial city through the grace of God and abide within the exalted habitation. Baha'u'llah concludes with 2 more Quranic verses. The following sections will provide the background information to the verses from the Quran cited in this paragraph, to make the concepts enshrined in each clause more cogent. In the Baha'i scriptures, the appearance of a new manifestation of God has been expressed as the break of morn. For example, Abdul-Baha states that the 20th century would be unique in the history of the Baha'i faith. In the ages to come, though the cause of God may rise and grow 100-fold, and the shade of the Sadratul Muntaha shelter all mankind, yet this present century shall stand unrivaled, for it hath witnessed the breaking of that morn and the rising of that sun. This century is verily the century of his light and the dayspring of his revelation. And this, friends, is from selections from the writing of Abdul-Baha, page 67. Similarly, the radiance, knowledge, and blessings received through a revelation are depicted as the light bestowed on humanity through the rise of the Sun of Reality. For example, Baha'u'llah refers to himself in the Kitáb-i-Iqan as the dayspring of God's light, when he writes, O Emperor of Austria, he who is the dayspring of God's light dwelt in the prison of Akka at the time when thou didst set forth to visit the Aqsa Mosque. And this is Kitab-i-Iqan, page 50. In one of his talks in Paris, and this is the Abdul-Baha in Paris Talks, page 68, Abdul-Baha presents 3 types of light. There is the visible light of the sun, by whose aid we can discern the beauties of the world around us. Without this we could see nothing. Nevertheless, though it is the function of this light to make things visible to us, it cannot give us the power to see them or to understand what their various charms may be, for this light has no intelligence, no consciousness. It is the light of the intellect which gives us knowledge and understanding, and without this light the physical eyes would be useless. Then there is the divine light that gives us sight for the invisible things, and which enables us to see truths that will only be visible to the world thousands of years hence. This is the light that enabled the prophets to see 2,000 years in advance what was going to take place, and today we see the realization of their vision. In the same talk, Abdul-Baha explains that the light of the intellect is born out of the divine light. He also describes the effects of the divine light. It enables us to understand the realities. It empowers us to know the secret things of God. It makes the hidden ways to be made plain before our eyes. It shows to the eyes of our spirits all that exists in God's kingdom, and causes the realities of things to be made visible through the help of the light. All the spiritual interpretations of the holy writings has been made plain, and the hidden things of God's universe have become manifest, and we have been enabled to comprehend the divine purposes for man. At the time of the appearance of a new manifestation of God, the divine light is renewed, and similarly to the light of a rising sun, its radiance is shed upon the entire world. The verse, God is the light of the heavens and of the earth, from the Quran has been cited by Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha. The complete verse was studied earlier. The imagery of light is mentioned a number of times in the following verse. God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. His light is like a niche in which is a lamp, the lamp encased in glass, the glass as it were a glistening star. From a blessed tree it is lighted. The olive neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil well nigh shine out, even though fire touched it not. It is light upon light. God guideth whom he will to his light, and God setteth forth parables to men, for God knoweth all things. And this is from the Quran, chapter 24, verse 35. Abdul-Baha states that the light mentioned in this verse is the divine light. This is the light by which Moses was enabled to see and comprehend the divine appearance, and to hear the heavenly voice which spoke to him from the burning bush. And friends, this was from Abdul-Baha, Paris Talks, page 68. Abdul-Baha goes on, also mentions in Tablets of the Divine Plan that the propagation and teaching of the cause of Baha'u'llah is the realization of this verse of the Quran. And that's in Tablets of the Divine Plan, page 62. In the Quran, chapter 9, verse 33, God describes his power and desire to perfect his light, despite the desire of his enemies to extinguish it. Fain would they put out God's light with their mouths, but God hath willed to perfect his light, albeit the individuals abhor it. In every instance, the perfection of God's light safeguards God's new revelation from the assault of his opponents. Baha'u'llah expresses the unassailability of his revelation through a similar language of imagery. Seek ye to put out God's light that shineth upon his earth? Averse is God from what ye desire. He shall perfect his light, albeit ye abhor it in the secret of your hearts. This, friends, is from Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, page 224. In paragraph 99, Baha'u'llah quotes the Quran, chapter 9, verse 33, to highlight that the revelation of the Bab will survive despite the martyrdom of the Bab and the intense persecution of his followers. In the ensuing statements of paragraph 99, Baha'u'llah, in an allegorical language, combines indirect references to a number of Quranic verses to describe the expected attitude and deeds on the day of resurrection. The clause, "In his grasp he holdeth the kingdom of all things," attests to the sovereignty and power of God over all things. According to Abdul-Baha, there are 4 kingdoms in the world of existence: mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. And this is from Abdul-Baha into Tablet to Auguste Forel, page 13. God has firm hold on all of these kingdoms. The following verses are mentioned in a number of times in the Quran in different contexts. In the majority of cases, the sovereignty of God is restated. His is the kingdom of the heavens and the earth, and to God shall all things return. And this is from Quran, chapter 57, verse 6. And again, for the kingdom of the heavens and the earth is God's, and God hath power over all things. And this is from the Quran, chapter 3, verse 186. There are also some verses that highlight the dominance of God on the day of resurrection. And it says, "On that day the kingdom shall be God's, he shall judge between them, and they who shall have believed and done the things that are right shall be in gardens of delight." And this is from Quran chapter 22, verse 55. This statement is also made in similar form in a number of tablets of the Blessed Bab. And this is in selections from the writings of the Bab, page 18, also on page 172. Baha'u'llah then cites the verse, "Verily we are God's, and unto him we do return." And friends, this verse is in the Quran, chapter 2, verse 151. This is a recurring theme in the Quran. There are many verses in which the concept of belonging to God and of returning to him is stated in different ways. Apart from its literal meaning, some contexts indicate that the statement "the return to God" has a symbolic meaning pointing to the day of God and the day of resurrection. One example is the verse from the surah of the cow. What can such expect but that God should come down to them overshadowed with clouds, and the angels also, and their doom be sealed, and to God shall all things return. And as mentioned, this is in chapter 2, verse 7. Every individual should aim to enter the celestial city. The celestial city is the condition of acknowledging that God has created us. In the hidden words, this is from the hidden words in the Persian, number 17, Baha'u'llah refers to the celestial city as the placeless abode, the gates of which are wide open as the result of his revelation. The habitation of his lovers in the city is ornamented with their blood. Perhaps this refers to the act of self-sacrifice needed to attain such a station. We would abide within the exalted habitation after entering the city. This is the station of attaining his presence and returning to our source. This will complete the cycle of our existence in the same way in which water that evaporates from the ocean forms a cloud, returns to the earth as rain, and flows in the rivers to return to the ocean. And friends, this is a topic that is explained further by Baha'u'llah in later parts of the Kitab-i-Iqan. Very good, friends. Thank you.